I love that kid. Do you not love that kid? And when that music just happened at the end, I saw you, Carrie. You started to move a little bit. I like that. In the dark, you can move. I see some of you during the videos when the music comes on. You're like, hey, I think we should be able to move and dance a little bit more in church. Does anybody else think so? I think Sean's like, no. But listen, forget the cowboy boogie. We got the basement boogie. Come on, you got a 2-2-step and basement boogie. Grab your sweetheart and swing out with. I don't know how it goes. Woo-hoo-hoo. I'm sorry about all that. This is your first time here. I don't normally do that, but whatever. Hey, the reason we showed that video is because I want you to cowboy boogie yourself to church next weekend because it is Mom's Day, people. Yeah. Woo, yeah, we can give it up for some moms ahead of time. Let's give it up for the moms. Listen, do not miss next Sunday. Don't skip. Don't miss it, okay? Because I know some of you are like, well, I'm not a mom. I didn't be here. Listen, next weekend is for everybody who ever had a mother. Which would be everybody, all of us, all right? So cowboy boogie yourself to church next weekend. You going to be here? Okay, that's good. Hey, speaking of the cowboy boogie, I saw a lot of it last night because I officiated a wedding for our first ever couple that met right here in the basement. Darryl and Chrissy, I think we got their picture. Here's Darryl and Chrissy. They normally hail from this section right here. Darryl and Chrissy have the most perfect teeth ever. And Darryl was Easter selfie stick guy. Who got Easter selfie stick guide by Darryl? Who got the little Darryl effect? Yeah, I love it. And it was an amazing wedding. These guys are in love. They met here in the basement, so they are officially like Mr. and Mrs. Basement, okay? But they may be watching this, and if they're not, our online family is watching it. And if they're not, we have some people who are here for the first time. So can we just give it up for Darryl, Chrissy, first-timers, onliners, everybody? Yes. If we've not met before, my name is Joel, and I'm one of the pastors around here. Love it that y'all are here. You guys are singing so good. Wasn't the worship insane this morning? It was so good. And if you're here for the first time or you weren't here last weekend, we're in this series called Basement Talk. And the reason we named it Basement Talk is because we're in a basement. Can't you smell it? This is a basement, and the idea for this series is simple. We're just talking about our basement. We're talking about our church, and today I want to talk about worship in the basement, and I'm calling this message, and we'll put this on the screen. I'm calling this message, The Real MVP. The Real MVP. So I want you to tell 3 people, you're the real MVP. You got to church today. You made it. You're the real MVP. Go ahead, talk to your neighbor. I'm giving you all some brownie points with your spouse right now. This is good. Hey, I'm curious, who is sick of pollen? Is anybody sick of pollen? Oh my goodness. Listen, when you all walked into church, some of y'all look like oranges yellow. I thought y'all had like Cheetos for breakfast. I didn't know. But you just got pollinated on your way into church. Like we're all part of the circle of life somehow. I don't know how that works. But I love the spring. But there's 2 things I don't love about the spring. Number 1, pollen. Being pollinated. All right, number 2, this time of year, I start to have significant NFL withdrawal. Come on, who is with me? Who misses some football? Who needs some football in your life? Man, listen, some of you are raising your hand and you're Eagles fans. I thought you all enjoyed it when the season wasn't playing, like when you weren't losing. Pastor Byrne. Hey, let me just give you all a bone, Eagles fans. All right, the Ravens didn't even make it into the playoffs last year, and the Eagles did. That's true. It's true. Now, I want to point out that we actually have real teams in our division, not pee-wee football teams like Sean's Commanders. All right. Sorry, I'm sorry, Sean. Maybe the Giants. The Giants are in your division, right? Yeah, the giant losers in your division. Okay, so anyway. But man, I miss football this time of year. I want to sit on my couch, eat my buffalo chicken dip, watch the Ravens destroy the Steelers. Take it, Steelers. Anyway, I love football, and I was thinking about football this week. And last year, me and my brother Tim, we went to at least my first ever Monday night Baltimore Ravens football game. And the Ravens played the Colts. Now, where are the Eagles fans again? Eagles fans? Okay, you'll know this. Maybe you'll know this. The Colts quarterback is your old quarterback, Carson Wentz. He went to the Colts, okay? He moved on, all right? And so we went to this game. We had amazing seats. We're like halfway up. We're right at the 50-yard line. We should have an amazing view of the field, right? Right?
Yeah.
Wrong. Because the world's most drunkest Ravens fan sat right in front of me. And by sat, I mean stood. And by stood, I mean he didn't wear his shirt the entire game. Her shirt was in his hand, and in his other hand, he was holding on to his friend Miller. So you'll get that later. All right, anyway. The whole game, this guy's like, woo! All right, and I took a picture of him in one of his calmer moments. All right, this is one of his calmer moments right here. All right, now he must have been trading out his friend Miller for his friend Bud because his hand is empty. But his shirt is still off. Do you see this guy with his shirt off? This guy, the whole game, I'm telling you, woo! And he was the most entertaining part of this game because the Ravens were getting destroyed. It was terrible, all right? At the end of the third quarter, we were losing 22-3. And now, this guy didn't even know the score. I mean, it didn't matter if we were losing. Like, when the other team scored, he's like, woo, go Ravens. Like, he didn't know. I was looking it up this week. ESPN, their analytics said at the end of the third quarter, we had a 98% chance to lose that game. 98% chance. It was terrible, okay? And so my brother said right at the end of the third quarter, he's like, if the Ravens don't score on this next drive, we're out. Because I'm pretty sure Frank the Tank here is going to start taking off more than his shirt. So I'm like, that's a good idea. We're going to be out here. So I don't know what happened, but I personally think Frank the Tank here single-handedly motivated Lamar Jackson, who's our quarterback, to start doing Lamar Jackson things. Because as soon as Tim was like, we're going to leave if we don't score. All right, this guy's like, woo! And Lamar Jackson goes back and he throws a touchdown pass to Hollywood Brown. The whole crowd goes crazy, okay? This guy celebrates with another friend, Miller, all right? So he's excited. And then we get the ball again, and Lamar Jackson goes and he throws the touchdown pass to Mark Andrews. And then another touchdown pass to Mark Andrews. And this guy is still shirtless. But he's still got his pants on, so that's a win, all right? So we tie up the game, and listen, 98% chance that we're going to lose the game. We make it to overtime. Woo! We go to overtime, all right? So we go to overtime, and my parents are watching the game at home. And so right when we go to overtime, my parents send me a text, and I look at it, and this is them watching the game at home. They really sent me that picture. I'm like, you guys look a little too happy. Is your friend Miller over? Just kidding. Stop it. Anyway, so then, all right, everybody in the whole stadium's cheering. This has been an amazing comeback. And then 4 minutes left in overtime. Lamar Jackson goes back and he throws the ball to Hollywood Brown. The whole stadium is like in slow motion, like, woo, woo, woo. All right, now at this point, Frank the Tank is passed out. Okay, he's gone. Like he's gone. But the ball's in the air. Hollywood Brown catches the ball in the end zone. We win the game, people. Come on, a Ravens fan somewhere. We won the game. We won the game. And Carson Wentz went home a loser, all right? And it was Lamar Jackson's greatest comeback in his career. And the whole stadium, after we won, all right, the whole stadium just stayed there. And everybody just started cheering for Lamar Jackson. The whole stadium was going, MVP, MVP. And we were psyched out. Now, at some point, I think we woke up Frank the Tank, all right? He woke up and was like, where am I? Did the Orioles win? Did they win? But man, we were cheering. We were cheering for our team. And here's my point. when I left that stadium, I thought, we're all hardwired to cheer for something. Like we want to celebrate, as is evidenced by how we act when our football team wins, right? And I was thinking about that this week, and I thought, if I can be excited for my football team, how much more excited should I be to show up in the basement and worship and cheer for the God that I love? You know what I'm saying? I think I should be more excited for that. And Orioles fans, our God isn't having a losing season. Look, we're cheering for a God who spoke the galaxy and the cosmos into existence. We're cheering for a God who walks with you through your ups and your downs and never walks away from you. We're cheering for a God who knows what you did last summer. And he is everywhere, even at the starboard, okay? And he loves you anyway. That's who we're cheering for. That is our God. He is the real MVP. It is him. It is our God. And so just somebody help me out with this. MVP. 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 That worked out good. I like it. Now, I know some of you are like, that was weird. Worship is for weirdos. Weirdo. I know some of you are thinking that. And that's okay, because I remember when I was a little kid, I thought worship was so weird. And we went to, our Millsboro campus was Gumboro Fellowship Church back in the day. And we had this guy in our church when I would go there as a kid. His name was Brother Phil. And when the music started, Brother Phil started. Brother Phil, I'm pretty sure, was related to Uncle Frank the Tank, all right? So, like, and this is true. Our old church, we used to have these, like, banner flag things on the walls, like, hanging on the walls. And it would say, like, King of Kings and Lord of Lords on these flags. And as soon as the music would start, Brother Phil would jump out of his red pew. And this is true, he would run to the flags that were bolted on the wall, rip them off the wall, start running around the sanctuary during worship going, woo, hallelujah. And I was like, I think Brother Phil's on the sauce. Like, he is too much with Bud and Miller. Like, I don't know what's going on with Brother Phil. And I thought it was the strangest thing as like an 8-year-old kid. Now, by the way, nobody, during the next time we do music, don't go like rip the thermostat off the wall. Like HVAC, like don't do that. We have security, they will tackle you in Jesus' name, all right? They are coming after you. Don't do that. But I say that because I've thought what you've thought before. Maybe this morning, like during the music, people were singing and you like saw somebody with their hand raised and you're like, he's got a question. Who answers it? Does the worship leader answer the question? Who answers the questions here? Oh, look at that guy. He's got 2 questions. There's 2 questions over there. There's one over here. I don't know. And so I get it. I get where you're coming from. And I didn't get worship until I got my favorite verse in the Bible, which is Romans 5:8, that says, while I was still a sinner, Jesus gave up his life for me. God demonstrates his love for me in this, that while I was a sinner, he died for me. And now that I get that, I'm like, woo, Jesus loves me even though I'm a sinner. And he loves you guys even though you are sinners, all right? Ed, big sinner, okay, Matt, whoa, sinner, I don't know, man. John, I'm looking for you. Whoa, boy, okay, But listen, God loves us anyway. So how do I not show up here and be like, God, you are the real MVP. It's you. You're the one. Now, we don't, no judgment in our church. We don't do that around here. But, sometimes during worship, some of y'all look like you got hit with hairspray. Sometimes it's like mid-coffee hold hairspray, like. And listen, everybody expresses themselves different, right? Everybody does that different. And I've heard people say, I'm just not that expressive. of a person, I kind of like keep it in the box. And I would believe that, except I see some of you all leave church here in your Jeep with the top down, and you're listening to Fancy Like. You're like, Applebee's on the date night, got the Oreo shake with the Bourbon Street steak, and I'm like, I don't know. And you're just like, in your car, like, woo! And I'm like, you ain't that? You're kind of expressive. I think you're maybe a little expressive. And so, like, I know we all express ourselves differently, but worship is simply us expressing that, God, you are the real MVP. It is you. You are the real MVP. And so I want to talk about worship a little bit. And so I want to take you back to Acts chapter 2. And last weekend we were in Acts. And if you missed last weekend, Acts is kind of like the book of the Bible where Jesus' idea for the church comes to life. So the church kind of has its grand opening. And I just want to show you that we don't just do worship in the basement because we wanted to make up this idea. Worship has been part of church since the very start. And so this is at the very beginning of the church, Acts chapter 2, starting in verse 46. It says this, what'd they do? They worshiped together at the temple, like in their basement. They worshiped at the temple each day. But outside the temple, they met in homes for the Lord's Supper. And they shared their meals, at the Applebee's with the Applebee's shake and all that, with their great joy outside of church and generosity. And all the while, everybody say all the while. All the while. While they're all those places, all the while praising God and enjoying the goodwill of all the people. All the while. Everybody say all the while. All the while. Do you know that worship doesn't just happen in church? Worship isn't just like singing in a basement. Did you know this? Worship is anything, anywhere that you do that just says, God, you are the real MVP. It's anything, okay? And so, listen, we can worship all the while I'm like fishing with my kids. Like I was doing last week, and I'm looking at them, I'm like, God, this moment is a gift. That can be worship. We can worship when we give, when we pray. We can worship. We can worship when you're like driving down Route 1, in your Jeep with the top down, listening to Fancy Like, and somebody cuts you off in traffic. Who's it happened to? Come on, it's happened to you. And you want to yell at them, right? You want to wave at them without using all your fingers. But I know you might get mad, but when you are kind to that person, even when they make you mad, did you know kindness can be worship? Being kind can be worship. When you're cutting grass, you can be like, God, you created this. Could you slow it down a little bit? But listen, worship isn't just singing. It's anything. It's all the while. It's when we're out just saying, God, you are the one I love. You are the real MVP. You are the creator of all this. And so you might still be like, yeah, but I still think worship is weird. Why would I worship, y'all? You might say that. I got two reasons why I think we should all worship. The first one is this, and we'll put it on the screen. Worship makes you unshakable. It makes you unshakable. Now, last week, I almost stepped on two snakes. Two snakes. And I worship both times, let me tell you. The last time I was cutting my grass, and I looked down, and no lie, this snake was like 2 inches from my foot. And what did I do? Woo! I'm sure my neighbors were like, oh, look at the pastor. He's worshiping in his yard, No, I was like, snake, get out of here. And I told my boy Nixon, who's 6, about the snake that almost got me when I was cutting grass. And he's like, Dad, I would have been shook. I was like, who are you? Like, you a rap artist? Like, what does that even mean? He's like, it means being afraid, Dad. I'm like, okay, Nixon. So now I know what shook means. And he said that, and this week I'm kind of preparing this message. Now I thought about that word shook. And I'm curious, has anybody here ever been in an earthquake and you've been like for real shook before? Anybody been in an earthquake? Let me see your hand. You've been in an earthquake? Wow. Glad you all made it. I'm glad you're alive. Glad you didn't fall into the earth. Yeah, I'm glad you're here, Ed. Now, I got to just be honest with you. I'm happy to report that I survived the great Delaware earthquake of 2017. Did you know we had our biggest ever recorded earthquake in Delaware in 2017? Who knew this? Yeah, all right. There was actual damage. I have some pictures from Long Neck, Delaware from the lawn chairs all over the place. That picture's not real, but we did really have an earthquake in Delaware. A 4.1 magnitude earthquake. And I'd never even felt it. I didn't even know what happened. Here's what happened. I was at our Millsboro campus, and I was in my office, and I was talking to my friend David. And the guy in the next office over, his name's Matt. Matt came running in, and Matt was like, "Are you guys okay? Is everybody safe in here?" I'm like, "Are you okay? Are you friends with Frank the Tank? Like, we'll do random drug testing on you, and it's right now. Your random moment is right now." He's like, "No, there was an earthquake." I'm like, "No, what do you mean there was an earthquake?" And I looked over, and I had a pencil that fell over, so I was like, "Okay, maybe we had an earthquake." But I didn't even know it even happened. Now, Matt was much afraid, all right? He was very shook. Who felt the great earthquake of Delaware in 2017? Wow. Who needs their head checked? And you're like me, and you didn't even know what happened. You didn't even know. Okay, yeah, that's me. Most of us knew. I didn't even know. But apparently we all got shook, according to Nixon. And, we don't just get shook in earthquakes. We can get shook in life. You ever been shook in life? Maybe you got more bills than you got expenses, or you got more expenses than you got money. That's the way to put it. And you get shook. Maybe you have a teenager, and they is crazy. And you want to shake them, don't you? Maybe you lose somebody. Maybe you get a bad diagnosis from the doctor. Maybe something happens that kind of shakes you in life. Maybe you go to Applebee's on a date night, but it turns into Applebee's and it's fight night. And we get shook. One more time. Who's been shook? If you've been shook, just say, "I got shook, I got shook, I got shook." We've all been shook by something in life. And I want to take you back to Acts, because we started out in Acts chapter 2. I want to fast forward to Acts chapter 16. And in the meantime, we meet these characters, Paul and Silas. And one day, Paul and Silas, they get wrongfully accused of doing something to hurt this girl, but they actually helped this girl. And so they get wrongfully accused for it. They get beaten, and then they get thrown into prison. All right, so they were doing the right thing, and they ended up in the wrong place. Has this ever happened? Yes. And so they get thrown in the inner dungeon of prison, not just like the outer prison with the windows. They get to the inner dungeon of the prison, and they're having their worst day of their life. And so everything is shaking around them, but somehow Paul and Silas are unshakable. And let me just show you what they did on the worst day of their life. Acts 16, verse 25. It says, around midnight, the same day, they got thrown into prison, wrongfully accused, beaten. Around midnight, Paul and Silas were praying. And what did shook Paul and Silas do? They're singing hymns. They're singing hymns to God, and the other prisoners were listening. And suddenly, there was a massive earthquake. Massive. Not like the great Delaware earthquake of 2017, people. This is a real one, all right? So a massive earthquake, and the prison was shaken to its foundations. And all the doors immediately flew open. The chairs in Long Neck fell over. And the chains of every prisoner fell off. Fell off. And listen, when everything was shaking around Paul and Silas, did they blame God for it? Yes or no? No. Did they post about it on Facebook? No. Did they start a GoFundMe page to rebuild the prison? We will rebuild, hashtag. No? What did they do? They worshiped. They did the basement boogie. And let me just tell you this. How do you get through your worst day? You worship. Worship gets you through your worst day. How do you get through your worst day? You worship. And somebody needs to hear this, all right? At some point in their worship, all right, they were set free. The doors opened up. The chains fell off. Somebody needs to hear this. Worship is the very thing that's going to set you free from what's shaking you up. Worship is the thing that can keep us stable when everything around us is shaking. And so these guys get set free. Everything's shaking around them. And in the shake, God used the shake to set them free. And did you know that God can use whatever's shaking you right now to set you free? Maybe you're being shook right now by something in your life. Maybe you've hit rock bottom. You know the good thing about rock bottom? There's only one direction to go. Up, right? And only our great God can use the shake to set us free. And so we worship through the bad news. We trust God through the bad news. We keep on showing up in the basement through the bad news. We keep on doing that through the bad news because our God is unshakable. He's unshakable. Now, the other morning I was doing my devotions. I don't know why I do it first thing in the morning. Sometimes it's a good idea. Sometimes I fall asleep. You know? And so the other morning I was reading Psalm, and I've been in Psalm forever, and I'm reading it, and I get to Psalms 112, and I'll be honest, if you looked at me, I looked like I was on the NyQuil IV drip. Just like, okay, I'm trying to stay here, stay awake. And I read verse 7, and it was like, it turned from the NyQuil IV drip to the Red Bull IV drip. I just read it, I'm like, whoo, what? And so here's what I was reading, and I'll start out the way I start out, verse 7. It's like, they do not fear bad news. They do not fear bad news. They do not fear bad news. They do, and I'm like, this is about people who trust God. I'm like, they do not fear bad news. How do I get in on that? Because if you guys watch the actual news, like ever, has anybody ever watched the actual news? Listen, I'm probably the only one, but I would like to see some actual good news on the news every once in a while. Would anybody like to see some good news on the news? It's all bad. Look, here's the headline. You're going to die. That's it. Now, maybe you've been sleeping the last 3 years, so I'm just going to catch you up on the last 3 years. Headlines, okay? Is that okay? 3 years ago, breaking news. COVID is here. You're going to die. I'm like, oh, that's scary. More breaking news. We thought COVID was bad, but now COVID has a brother named Delta. You didn't die last time, but you're going to die from this one. Then it's like, oh, you thought Delta was bad. Wait till you get a hold of Frelta. I'm like, Frelta? Like, wasn't a puppy born anywhere? Can we not show a picture of a puppy? Like, could we not do that? And now it does seem like some of the news of that is kind of backing off. So I was like, okay, we're good. But then it's like, no, breaking news. Russia invades Ukraine. This really is the end of the world this time. And it's like bad news after bad news after bad news. Like every time I look, it's like, you know, and then on top of that, inflation, gas prices are higher, Will Smith. Okay, I'm like, what do I do? Everything feels like bad news, doesn't it? Doesn't it just feel like all we hear is bad news? And like I'm at the point now where before I open up the news app on my phone, I got to like work things out in me. I'm like, here we go. Okay, like it's just this crazy. And then I read this and it's like, oh, they do not fear bad news. They don't fear. And I'm challenging myself to be like, I want to be the Jesus follower who's like, I'm not afraid of bad news. I don't fear bad news. Because could you imagine not being afraid of bad news? And let me just read you the whole verse. This is the whole verse of verse 7. It says this, they do not fear bad news. And I like to put a because right here. Because they confidently trust the Lord to care for them. That's why they don't fear bad news. All right. This is the secret sauce to worship, by the way. This is worship. This is when you're like, worship is not saying bad news, you're the real MVP. Worship is saying bad news, you may be real, but my God is the real MVP. So I'm going to be okay because breaking news, my confidence is in my God. And so I can't be shook. Tell 3 people, you can't be shook. You can't be shook. You can't be 3. Come on, some of you, get in it, do it. Remind yourself. And so worship makes us unshakable. We saw it with Paul and Silas. My last point is this. Worship makes you unwitherable. Everybody say unwitherable. Okay, I made that word up. It's not in the dictionary. Don't look at it. It ain't there, okay? Now, I just want to point out that my wife can find the greatest deals on the planet. I'm telling you, nobody can find better deals than my wife, Stacy, okay? Stacy will go shopping, and she'll come home, and her Sienna minivan is slammed. I'm talking, they're like Marshall packages falling out the windows. Like, there's UPS drivers driving by her house real slow. Like, she's got more packages in there than we got in our brown truck. And I'll start freaking out when she pulls in after shopping because I'm like, baby, like, I'm a pastor. I'm not pastor sugar daddy. Or like, we can't afford all this stuff. And she'll be like, honey, I got all this for $17. I'm like, what, you robbed the place? Are the cops coming? What? How did that happen? But my wife can find better deals than anybody on the planet. And so I shouldn't have been surprised a couple years ago when I wanted some double knockout roses for our mulch bed because those are my favorite variety of roses. Don't judge me. And Stacy knew this. So one day she comes home and her minivan is slammed to the ground with these double knockout roses that she got for our mulch bed. And I was so excited until I saw the double knockout roses because they were dead. I'm talking, they were more withered than King Tut. Like I don't think Jesus could save these things. They were more dead than Lazarus. They were dead. And I was like, babe, what are you doing? And she's like, honey, I got these on the discount plant rack at Lowe's for $2. I'm like, and we're both cheap, but I'm like, are we that cheap? Are we discount plant rack cheap? Like, is that who we are now? And she was like, oh, they'll be fine. I'll bring them back to life. Now, I'm going to get in trouble for saying this, but I do this at my own expense, all right? If anybody is an expert at dead plants, it's my wife. She has killed more of our houseplants than all the houseplants all y'all have killed combined, okay? Like, I call her Roundup. Like, she just... If you need your houseplant killed, bring it to our house. We will kill it, all right? And somehow, I don't know if she has a direct link with God or what, but somehow she will resurrect these dead, mummified plants that we have. And somehow, and so when she's like, honey, just trust me, I can bring these roses back to life. I'm like, if anybody can do it, Roundup can. And so I don't know what, she planted these double knockout roses, and then, she was like watering them every day, and I think she was putting like essential oils on the leaves or something. I don't know what she was doing. But guess who has some of the most beautiful, unwithered, $2 discount double knockout roses at their house right now? Guess who? Your pastor, people. Give it up for Roundup in the back, all right? She did it. She brought them back to life. I really wish I took a picture of how withered these plants were. So withered. And I was thinking about withered this week, and I think when we don't worship regularly, we can start to wither. We can start to, dry out spiritually, and we're not blooming, we're not full of life, we're not fully alive. But when we worship regularly, when we come to church and we're like, God, you are the real MVP. When we do that, I feel like we start to come alive again. I feel like when we do that, we start to unwither again. And so that song, Graves in the Gardens, you know that song? It says, you bring dead things back to life. You turn graves into gardens. And Paul and Silas were wrongfully accused on their worst day of their life. Wrongfully accused in prison. And they didn't wither, they worshiped. They didn't wither and they worshiped. And so I know worship can be weird. But I would rather be weird than wither. I would rather worship than wither. I'd rather worship than wither. I said I would rather worship than wither. Would anybody other in here rather worship than wither? Anybody at all? Would you rather worship than wither? And I'm glad Nate is up here because we're going to end with this, and the band is going to sing a song in just a second. But I just want to end with like a pastor confession. During COVID, I started to wither a little bit. And I say that because if you kind of know the timeline, the Sunday before COVID shut everything down, we launched our Go Above Ground campaign. You can't make this stuff up. I stood up here and I'm like, look at us, we're growing. We're going to go above ground. We're going to raise $1.5 million to go above ground. And the very next Saturday, it was like breaking news. meet your host for the next 2 years, Dr. Fauci. And I was like, Houston, we got a problem, okay? And so I started to well, I didn't understand the timing of this whole thing. And, our church was doing so well. We were having 250 people come every single week, 2 services. It was like blowing out. It was amazing. And then shut down. And then we finally got to open back up. And by the way, aren't you glad that it feels like COVID is kind of winding down? Aren't you glad? But it was crazy times. Zoom meetings, school closed, people riding around by themselves with a face mask on. I still saw it last week. I'm like, listen, I'm not an expert, but I don't think that's following the science, okay? I don't know. But finally, it feels like things are kind of changing. But I just had flashbacks because I remember the first Sunday we opened after COVID, I was standing right here, and we didn't have 250 people show up. 43 people showed up. 43. And they were volunteers, so we made them come. And I remember standing right here during the worship, and half the 43 volunteers are on the stage doing the worship. And I was like, are we done, God? Is this it? Because I'm kind of withering in this. And one of the best things that came out of COVID for me personally is I learned how to run outside. Our gym got closed, and I would jog all the time. And when I jog, I listen to worship music. Primarily, sometimes Guns N' Roses, but mainly worship music. That's true. And one day I was just kind of feeling it. I'm like, God, at 43 people, that's a small group. That's not a church. And I went to Spotify to pick out what I was going to listen to while I was running, and can't make this up. It said, the advertisement was, Elevation Worship's new album is out. And it's called The Old Church Basement. Look it up. It won a Grammy, The Old Church Basement. I'm like, what? That's us. We're the Old Church Basement. They're singing about us. And I started running, and I started listening to this song. And the idea for this Old Church Basement is that worship made this old church basement come alive. And I felt like God was saying, Joel, the old church basement hasn't withered. It's fine. Because it is unshakable, because I am unshakable. And so it's going to be okay. And can you just look around right now? Do we look like we're withered? No. We're good. And I just want to tell you, if you're not dead, God's not done. God's not done. We have a God in heaven who is unwitherable. We have the real MVP in heaven. That is who our God is. And so we're wired to worship something. We're all hardwired to celebrate something. And you can worship looking good. Whoop, and you all look good. You can worship a promotion at work. You can worship money. You can worship your kids' travel flute team. You can worship love. You can worship your favorite football team. But let me just tell you, none of that will make you unshakable. None of that will make you unwitherable. Only our God can shake up what is shaking us up to set us free. Only our God can turn graves into gardens, because that's who our God is. And I asked the band to do this final song. It's not Old Church Basement, but it's an elevation song called Graves into Gardens. And I want us all to worship for this song, but before we worship, I just wanted to read why we worship. I just wrote some stuff down this week, and so maybe this will help you, because when you worship, it's going to make you unshakable. When you worship, it's going to make you bold when you need to be bold. When you worship, you're going to be reminded that you are not alone. When you worship, it'll put your feet back on solid ground. When you worship, it'll remind you of God's grace. When you worship, it'll remind you that God's never going to let you down, because he never has let you down. Worship reminds you of all that God has done for you. Worship reminds you to give thanks. Worship reminds you that the bad news isn't the only news. Worship reminds you that someone bigger is in charge, and remind you that our God is faithful. It puts your focus on your provider and not your problems. It makes you unafraid of bad news. It gives you confidence. It gives you life. It can bring dead things back to life, and it can happen right here in our old church basements. It can happen right here in our old church basement. So I want everybody to stand to your feet. And here's what I want you to do. If you're not a Jesus follower, you don't have to do this. But the way I want to start off this song is I want our church to erupt for the real MVP. I want our church to go crazy for the one who can shake up what is shaking you up. I want us to be louder than the Baltimore Ravens stadium, and I want us to give it up right now for our God. So let's just give it up for our God. He is the real MVP. It is Him. It is our God. If He can shake up a prison, He can shake up what's locking you up right now. Come on now. Let's sing this song.